Today we're going to be speaking about citrus oils. What are citrus oils? It's a class within the group of essential oils, which is to say we extract something from an essential oil. We extract something usually from an herb or some kind of a botanical, which has a flavorful components. And here they're being taken from citrus, and particularly from the peels of certain citrus fruits. A popular one is oranges. There's a lot of types of oranges. There's sweet oranges and bitter orange and tangerines and mandarins and bergamot. Those are all types of oranges. And grapefruits, lemons, and limes. Those are the ones that I'm aware of the citrus oils that are taken from the peel. So one way to do it is you could actually take the peels and steam them to get the essential oils to separate from the peel, which is sort of the way you do it for regular essential oils. That's what you would do to to the botanicals. But it's more, I believe it's more common to cold press or to express them, the oil from the peels. And what that means is that they have fruits that are going to be juiced. They're going to be used for juicing. Before they take the juice out of them, they use machinery to essentially scrape off all of the peel off of the outside of the fruit. Just about all the peel, maybe leave just a drop. So they'll be able to squeeze it afterwards. And then those scraps that they've just gotten off, all those little pieces that they got off, they press them and to get the juice to come out of them. So you might see those listed as, it might say something like, oil orange CP. CP stands for cold pressed, okay, or just expressed, okay. But in most cases, that's what it is. It's done, through cold pressing. Pressing the peel to get this oil to drip out of it. Now, what comes out of the peel, the oil that comes out of the peel in its original state, is only about 5% flavorful components, and the rest of it is what are called terpenes, of which the most common one is D-limonene, which are present. They're not very good for people who want to make flavors. So the oil as it comes out is not strong enough or is not good enough to be used as a flavor. It could be used, but it has all these terpenes that come along with it that are not desirable. So what they'll do is they heat up the oil, and they do a distillation, which is to say is you heat up the oil to a temperature where the flavorful components, the aldehydes and ketones and whatever other kind of flavorful components are in there, whose boiling point is relatively low, they boil out and leave the terpenes behind. Okay, so then as those vapors escape with all that good flavor that you want, they get directed someplace where they get cooled down back into a liquid. Okay, and the more concentrated or distilled that you do the oil is, the more useful it is because it's better for use as a flavor component. And in the industry they call those, instead of calling it concentrations, they call that folds. So if you raise, for example, if the level of flavorful components was 5% and you raise it up to 20%, so now you'd call it, let's say if it was an orange oil, you'd say orange oiled fourfold, okay, because it's now 4 times as strong as it was in its, so to speak, original or natural state. Okay, or you could call it 4x. Some people use that term. Usually they call it folds. Okay, now people assume that the people who do this kind of processing use equipment that's dedicated for that. That's all they're doing is citrus oils, and that this process of folding doesn't raise any Kashrus concerns. So if you see something, that says oil lemon California twofold, that means it's twice as strong as the original one was. Some people also call this market as terpeneless, okay, which is again, as we've removed all the terpenes out of this to make it even better, or things like that. Okay. Now the terpenes themselves are actually sold off separately. There are some uses for them, and those are also again without Kashrus concerns. Okay, some I'll just mention some of the compounds that are considered the valuable compounds in each of these fruits. Are in orange, it's orange, and even in bergamot, it's linalool. Bergamot also has linalool acetate. Grapefruit, it's nutcatone. In mandarin oranges, it's methylanthranilate. For lemons, it's linalool also in citral, and limes, it's just citral. Okay. So now, another thing, aside from getting rid of the terpenes, there are waxes or resins which get dissolved into the oil. And what happens is that with time, if the oil sits for too long, the waxes start to fall out of the suspension, and they start to separate, and there'll be like cloudiness or particles in the oil. which isn't not desirable. So there are different ways to get rid of these waxes or these resins. One is to chill it to a very cold temperature, way colder than you'd ever keep it in storage. And when you make things cold, things don't dissolve as well in lower temperatures, so the waxes fall out of the suspension. You can clear them out, or they centrifuge them, or they filter them, or a combination of these to get them out. So those might be, excuse me, you might see an oil that's listed as, I don't know, it's oil lime de-resinified, when you took the resin out, or de-waxed. Okay, and all those mean that they've done one of these processes to take out the waxes or the resins. The same thing. Also, some people don't like the color. The color, because these tend to have a deep yellow or orange color to them, these oils. So they could be colored or color reduced. That's how they might be listed, as colored or color reduced. It's my impression that that's done by passing them through filters like diatomaceous earth that removes all the coloring. And none of these processes that I mentioned, to get rid of the waxes or the colors, appear to pose any Kashrus concern. So those are all considered okay. Now, when you name a citrus oil, so in addition to writing the type of oil, like I'll say, I don't know, grapefruit oil or oil grapefruit, and saying how many folds it is, because that's also important. So it might say oil grapefruit 4-fold. There's some other things that would be in the title also that often in the title. One is where it comes from. So it might be oil lime Tahiti 4-fold, or it might say we're part of a country. It'll say oil. Excuse me. It'll say oil lemon Argentina Tucumán 5-fold. Tucumán is a place, is an area in Argentina. Okay. Or it might say not the place where it comes from, but something about the fruit. Like it'll say oil tangerine Dancy. Dancy is a type of tangerine. It's a variety. So it's more making more clear exactly what it is. Or it'll say oil orange mid-season to tell you when they picked it for whatever, that says something about the fruit. Another type of thing it might say is quality issue. Like it'll say grapefruit oil high nutketone. Okay, that's describing to you what you're getting over here, or oil orange colorless, because that again to tell you something about it, or say it's pure or natural, all these types of things, again, which are all just descriptions and don't affect the kashrus. So based on everything I've been saying until now for the past couple of minutes, most people assume, and it's correct, that citrus oils, by and large, do not require any hashgachah. They're good without hashgachah. They're a group 1 material, which in fact is true. However, but there's a whole kinds of exceptions to that rule, which is what I'm going to talk about the rest of the time. The exceptions, the reasons why there might be places where there might be concern. Again, not to take away from the main rule, which is, yes, they tend to be group 1, but there are some exceptions there. And the first major exception is things come from Eretz Yisroel. And what I mean by that is that Eretz Yisroel has, mitzvahs atluis ba'aretz, different than the rest of the world, special mitzvahs that apply to produce. So things that are group 1, in general, are considered group 1, will automatically require hashgachah if they come from Eretz Yisroel. And it's considered so obvious that group 1 means you can get it from any supplier. But any means, but not from Eretz Yisroel. Because if it comes from Eretz Yisroel, you have to be careful about, we'll talk in a second about Arla and Trumas Maisus and Shvius. So that means if it's coming from Eretz Yisrael, all of a sudden it needs hashgachah or special care to make sure that it was taken care of, that whatever it is, that it's okay. So they don't even bother writing that on a Schedule A. It's assumed that everybody knows that piece of information and is alert for that. Okay, so that's in general for things that come from the ground. It's even more important for citrus oils because Eretz Yisrael is considered a significant supplier on the world market for citrus oils, and all the things that come from them, like nutketone, which is the aromatic element of, I think it was grapefruit. Was that what nutketone was? Whichever one it was from. So for those kind of things, you have to be extra careful that they come from Eretz Yisrael. However, that said, here's some information that have to do with that maybe make us think twice about how serious the concern is about things that come from Eretz Yisrael. The first is like this. As I've been mentioning, these citrus oils come from the peel. That's where they come from. So everybody agrees, that's a Beferish Shadin, that the Issur of Arla applies to the peels of the peels of fruit also. So from a theoretical sense, if the oil comes from a fruit which is in its first 3 years that it's growing, it will be a problem of Arla. And there are, in fact, some varieties of orange that have more than 5% arla, which is what many consider to be the cutoff. But the truth is that most citrus fruits have little or no realistic concern of coming from arla. Of course, you have to check the charts. And also, when we learned Hilchos Telaim, we spoke about exactly what the cutoff is. Let's say it's 1% or 10%. So again, as I said, many hold that 5% is. If it's under 5%, you don't have to worry about it. But again, there are different shitas. But most citrus fruits have almost no concern of arla, at least nowadays, the way they're produced, the way they're grown. In which case, the chashash of arla is not very serious. Okay. Now, what about trumas and? So the Chazon Ish says that there's no requirement to be mafresh trumas and from citrus peels. Because he says most people just throw them in the garbage. In other words, they're not considered edible, and therefore you don't have to be mafresh shumas or maestros. They're not considered a food. Now, he says, he mentions that he's disagreeing with the Nishmas Adam, who says that you do have to do hafrasha. Okay? So he mentions that, and he says, no, I don't agree with the Nishmas Adam. So it's worth thinking about that for a second, because the Chazon Ish says, the Nishmas Adam says that there are a lot of people who use orange peels for different food uses. There are food uses for them. He says, but the Lamaisa is, you want to know what their real status is. He says, there's 10 times as many people who throw them right in the garbage and they don't do anything with them. He says, so Lamaisa, that's what decides their status. And since so many more people throw them in the garbage, they're considered not edible, and therefore you don't have to be mafresh. That's what the Chazon Ish says. Now, if you look at the Nishmas Adam, you see that he seems to have preempted this question that the Chazon Ish was going to ask on him, 200 years later, which is, 150 years, 200 years later, which is, the Nishmas Adam says, he says, there are different breeds or types of oranges, and the ones that are used commercially are specially bred with that in mind. In other words, the ones that are commercially going to be turned into citrus oils are ones that are being grown with that understanding. They're going to take these oranges, they're going to peel these types of oranges, specific varieties of oranges. They're going to take these, they're going to scrape off the peels and take the oil out of them, and then squeeze the oranges or the other fruits for juice. And they're grown specifically for that purpose, which is to say is, so even though they're all oranges, but they're not all the same orange. This kind of oranges are grown with this in mind, and for those, the majority of them, in fact, are used for citrus oils. The peels are used; they are considered to be edible, as opposed to the oranges we have in our house that I buy in the supermarket. Those are not. So, which is to say, is the Nishmas Adam is saying is, in your house, if you have an orange, you might not be required to be mafresh trumas or he might agree that the peel from that orange, you're not chayav to be mafresh trumas or. But when we're talking commercially about buying citrus oil, using a citrus oil that came from Eretz Yisroel, then all of a sudden that it could be that in that case, that's the Nishmas Adam saying is these really are considered edible because most people do eat them, and in fact, I think nowadays that's correct that the oranges are grown like that. Although at least oranges are for sure, probably other fruits as well. There are specific varieties or breeds that are grown like that. Okay, now as far as Shemitah, the Chazon Ish says, it's right in the same piece, the Chazon Ish says that since the citrus peels are not edible, so halachas of Shemitah don't apply to them also. Of course, the Nishmas Adam will argue on that. But it's interesting that in Reb Chaim Kanievsky in Derech HaMunah says that Lamaisa you should probably be machmer, especially for lemon peels. Now, for lemon peels, in Hilchos Trumas, Reb Chaim Kanievsky brings a tzad that maybe lemons are worse than other fruits because people taka use them. They dunk the peels into their tea to give them flavor. In other words, they want the oil to come out. Not exactly sure how that really answers what the Chazon Ish said. I assume most people do throw them out, but anyhow, that's what. But he says for Shemitah you should seemingly be machmer. Not clear to me what the difference is. Why you'd be more machmer for Shemitah than for Trumas Meises, but that's what it seems to be. Okay, now let's move on to now we've talked about the basics of how you make these oils and the Eretz Yisroel issues. Now there are some things that have to do with additives. Well, let's go through a few of them. Some companies who make these will add antioxidant to prevent the oil from oxidizing, which means to spoil. So sometimes that will be the BHA or BHC, and something will be even in the name. I'll say, I don't know, Orange Valencia with 0.5% BHA in it. Okay, BHA and BHC are not a Kashrus concern, so that's okay if that's added into it. But other people will use tocopherols as do them. They'll call it, it'll say, I don't know, lemon oil, California type, tenfold with 0.1% tocopherol. Okay, again, it's the same. The tocopherol plays the same role to be an antioxidant. Now we've spoken in the past that antioxidants. That tocopherols are made from cotton oil or other vegetable oils, corn oil, different oils it's made from, which are kosher sensitive. It's true they're kosher sensitive, but if we think about it, okay, they're kosher sensitive, so we wouldn't want to put it in if it wasn't kosher. But Lamaisa is it's going to be batal because it's put in tiny percent, like I just said to you, it's in 0.1%. It's in tiny amounts of antioxidants, and if it's not considered davar hamayimid for two reasons. First of all, it's not considered davar hamayimid because we spoke about this when we learned about davar hamayimid, that something that prevents spoilage is not a davar hamayimid. A maimid has to make a change in the food. This doesn't change anything when you add it in. It just keeps it the way it is going forward. That's not considered davar hamayimid. And the second thing is that a davar hamayimid is only not batal if it's inherently not kosher. If it's just not kosher because it has because of kalim issues, that can be batal. It's not a problem. So in din, it's for sure batal, and therefore min hadin, the fact that these have some tocopherols mixed in is not a concern. Halachically, it's not a concern. Some hashgachas will say no. If it says on it with 1%, 0.1% tocopherol, so it's basically like an advertisement. This thing says on it, this contains ingredients that might not be kosher, so they don't want to use it as a group one, and that would they would say, no, don't take it like that. But that's different ways of approaching something like this. And then it's for sure not a concern. And for sure the oil is kosher, whether you want, and for sure even when it'll be used in the food, it'll be kosher. But some people wouldn't want to consider that to be a group one. Okay, now, some citrus oils will have other wording that has to do with that are clear that something was added into it, like let's say naturally fortified or WONF, meaning with other natural flavors, and something was added in. Obviously, in those cases, we'd want to know what's been added in, or it'll say something else that gives us a hint that they played around with the oil to make it like something else. It'll say 87123 type, meaning we're trying to mimic something else, and that potentially means that something was added into them. So in all these kind of cases, before approving it, you'd want to know what it is that was added in, or get some more information on it, because it makes you concerned that who knows what was put into it. One last kind of additive is that citrus oils, kishmoy kenhu, they're oils. They don't mix with water. So if you're going to want to use a citrus oil in your seltzer or soda or some other kind of beverage, it's not going to work. If you want to flavor a seltzer with lime oil, it's not going to stay in the water. And you have to add an emulsifier to make it mix. Okay, two of the common ones that are used for this are glycerol esters of wood rosin or brominated vegetable oil, both of which are kosher sensitive. Not clear to me that they're considered davar hamayimid. I'm not sure about that. I guess it might depend on how they're used. Depending on different factors. But the point is that if a citrus oil comes and says that it is water soluble, like orange oil terpeneless, orange. So this is one we had, oil orange terpeneless, fivefold water soluble. So the beginning of it was fine. Everything's fine, but water soluble, that would make us concerned of what's going on here. What was put into it to make it water soluble, and that would raise Kashrus concerns. Okay, now let's move on to some of them that they don't indicate there was an additive, but rather that there's some kind of a process was done with them. So I've already described a whole bunch of processes of distillation and filtering and chilling, all kinds of processes that are fine, that don't pose a concern. But here are some that actually would. And one is when it has like a generic special. It'll say specially dewaxed. Okay, well, so what is specially dewaxed or specially processed or extra rectified? So special something is happening to this thing. Well, as soon as you say that makes the rabbis a little nervous. What was a special process of dewaxing that's different than everybody else's? And you'd want to find out more information before approving that is okay. Or other ones will say them they were rectified or enhanced or washed. So how did they do that? How did they rectify this? What did they do to enhance it? Washing is a process similar to folding. It's you rinse it with some kind of a solvent that extracts the flavorful component or the something that you're looking for. But what did you wash it with? What was the process that you used? So all of these would make people wonder. They're somewhat ambiguous. You start to wonder, what is it that was done to this thing to tell us? And then, so before proving it, you'd want to know that those things were okay. Now, a very specific example of that is something that I think is pretty new, and it's listed. It'll be called LAR, or low AR, and that stands for low agricultural residue, which means is something was done to the oil in order to get out the pesticides or fertilizer or things like that. Okay, residue from the agricultural residue, things that are there from out in the farms and things like that. So something was done to this oil to get rid of those. It's possible what was done to them is a process that's very innocuous and doesn't cause any concern. Could be, but it's very vague as to what that process is. It's my impression that there's different ways to do this, and not so clear whether they are or not raise Kashrus concerns. And therefore, if it's low AR or LAR, that would be a reason to avoid using that without Hashgachah or without more details. Okay. Lastly, there are some items some oils that will be listed with these really strange or ambiguous terms. We don't even know what they mean. So sometimes it's just a matter of getting a spec sheet. Like it'll say. Let me see if I have one here. It'll say oil lemon California GQ. What does that stand for? What's GQ? Or SDP, oil lime SDP, or XSPDU. Now maybe that's completely something innocuous, but until someone finds out what it is, you have to wonder, what exactly is going on here. It's LAHV. What does that mean? So without knowing what it is, you'd be concerned that maybe it's not a group 1. And very, very last in ambiguous types of things is that sometimes something will be listed as an essence. It'll say oil orange essence. And that term is, again, ambiguous because there are people who call a flavor, what we call a flavor, they call an essence. Well, there are other things that could be called an essence. And so, again, if something was called an essence, you'd say, that might not actually be good old-fashioned citrus oil. It might be something else, not really a citrus oil. It's so to speak, pretending to be a citrus oil. It's acting like it's some kind of a oil, but it's orange oil essence. And we'd be nervous and say, let's make sure we know what it is before taking it as a group 1.